Shigo back where she belongs, Draken? Dementor demanded. He looked like a serial killer. He had his twisted smile on his face and he was shaking. Poor Amy was whimpering because she didn't want to die. What did I just say? He barked. Draken stood his ground protecting Shigo. He wasn't going to let him hurt her again. Put the gun down now, Dennis, he said calmly, looking at poor Amy who he once loved. She was now in love with Monkey Fist. But where was he anyway? Ha! Like I'm ever going to listen to you, he said in the gayest voice. Tie Shigo back down on the wooden table so no one gets hurt, he growled. Amy whimpered as he pressed the gun deeper into the back of her head. Come on, Draken, tie me up, Shigo said in a sexy voice, pulling him towards the table. He was confused for a moment when Shigo gave him a look that no one was looking, letting him know just to play it cool. The mentor talked Amy over to a cage and threw her inside. She was relieved that she didn't have to get her head blown off. She wasn't a bad villain, just a stuffed animal obsession kind of villain. Shigo laid back down and Draken tied her hands and feet so she was in a bad position. He made sure the knots were extra loose so she could escape when the time was right. I will never forgive myself if he hurts her, Draken said to himself as he finished tying her knots. He came up to her and looked her in the eyes. She was petrified. Draken could still see it in her eyes. He leaned down and kissed her romantically and told her that he would be right there for her. Draken then walked away facing Dementor. Since when did you love her? He barked. Since why the fuck do you care? Draken said coldly. Since I'm going to get her pregnant and she will be my queen. You know, Draken, that the only reason why I captured you was to get a hold of Shigo. I have one more reason, which is you're not getting anyone pregnant. You both went through this hell. If you lay one finger on Shigo's body, just one, I'm going to blow your brains out. Doesn't matter now because I still am, he said, walking towards him. Drew, no! Shigo and Amy screamed at the same time, making Dementor laugh. He snapped his fingers together as the robots came back into position and grabbed Draken. He kicked the air and squirmed out, but there was no way out. Let go of me, he shouted. Shut up, blue boy, one of them said. They held Draken against the wall as Dementor squirmed to get there was no way out. Let go of me, he screamed at them. Shut up, blue boy, one of them said. Then they held Draken against the wall, and Dementor had squirmed and walked over to Shigo. Now look what I have caught. A beautiful, sexy woman in my net. Well, kiss me, Shigo said, looking up at him. Draken's mouth fell open as he heard her said that. That's better, Dementor said, looking down at Shigo. He leaned in to kiss her, but when she turned her head, so she'd be kissing her neck, she turned her head and could see Draken and Amy. Then they mouthed the words, "It's all an act," to Draken, and he felt relieved. He knew that she would never cheat on him. Shigo then started to moan and sick and let the mentor crawl on top of her. Ah, this is the way too sick for me to watch, Amy said, turning around. She then put her head down and muttered, Poor Shigo doesn't need this. Draken pitied for Amy for a second and smiled and glad to know it was on his side. Oh, Dementor, you're so bad, Shigo said, faking the whole time. She felt something that she didn't want to feel and looked down and wrinkled her eyes. Out of the corner of Draken's eyes, he spotted Monkey Fist, who was still beating the whole time by head to toe by Dementor. Shh, he whispered, and he had a knife in his right hand. The robots were there but not working, but they were still holding Draken tightly. He walked in the room spotting Shigo being somewhat violated by Dementor. His mouth dropped open. He knew he had to save her, and there was no way out this time for Dementor. Monkey Fist stood behind Dementor raising a knife, letting Shigo know it was going to be over soon. Dementor? She asked. Yes, he said, very pleased, looking down upon her. Shigo laughed her evil laugh and smiled. Goodbye, you sick creep, she said, laughing again. And with that, Monkey Fist lowered the knife and stabbed Dementor. But he didn't yell. He gave a shocked expression and fell to the ground. And with that, Professor Dennis Dementor was dead. He's finally dead? Shigo asked, looking off the table and at Dementor, who still had an evil look upon his face with the knife upon his neck. No one had realized that Monkey Fist wasn't there to save him earlier, because Dementor had stabbed him. He had cuts all over him, but he was alright. He came over to Amy and unlocked her. He then flew into his arms and started to cry. "Draken," she said uncontrollably, and he slipped her from the dead robot's grasp. He then ran over and cut the ropes which was holding Shigo down. She sat up and flew to his arms. She loved him with all of her heart and would never want to leave him. Even if he died, she swore would go after him. "I love you so much," she said between sobs. He ran her fingers through her hair and cooed to her. "Shigo, it's okay. I'm here for you, don't worry. No matter where we are, no matter where I am, I will always be with you." And with that, he took her by the palm and kissed her. Amy and Monty were okay. They laughed at each other as they watched Draken and Shigo. Monty walked over to them and told them they better get going. The place wasn't safe. "Okay, let's get upstairs and get cleaned up," Draken said, walking behind everyone. He smiled as he held Shigo's hand. Then, let out of the corner of his eye, he spotted movement. At first he didn't know what to believe until he started to turn around. Slowly, Dementor had the gun to his left hand and was lending himself the corner of his eye of movement. At first he didn't know what to believe, and they aimed the gun at Shigo. Everything was in slow motion. He yelled to no protecting her, and he stood in front of her as his arms support out. "Drew, what are you doing?" she yelled. But Draken only heard a distant sound and then a crack of fire, and this time the gun bullet had hit his heart and his arms out. Oh, Dementor laughed, and of course, the distant sound before. Then Dementor laughed and rolled his down. This time he was really dead. "No, Draken! No, please don't be true!" Shigo shrieked as she flew down and held him in his arms. He was blinking quickly now and was gasping for air. "Someone call an ambulance! Damn it! Do it now!" Shigo screamed with all of her might. Monty and Amy ran upstairs. While Monkey Fist tried to get upstairs as he could, the pain was so evil. Shigo was crying uncontrollably, horribly, and everything seemed like a dream. He had his hands all over his heart and was looking up at Shigo. He moved his hand, still crying, and was so evil. But of course, he choked when he saw a hole in blood. "Don't leave me, Drew. Oh God, no. I love you with all my heart. I almost lost you once. Please don't let me leave you again," she said, while choked on her sobs when she saw a hole in blood. He managed to speak. "Shigo," he whispered. "Yes, Drew, I'm here. I will always be with you. I will always be with you and love you. Will you always be in my heart?" he said, crying, looking up at his beloved Shigo. He wanted to cry more and more, wishing the ambulance would get here sooner, and with that she leaned down and kissed him. What felt like a dream, she would wake up to sooner, starting a new day, which never happened. A new day which you find Dr. Draken in the kitchen, reading the paper and drinking coffee. A new day that would never come. "I will always love you," she whispered. And with that his head rolled to the sides and closed his eyes. Shigo knew she would never see his diamond faces again. Dr. Draken had a hard life and never had any friends when he was in grade school, and in high school was just the same. He was a pretty excellent student, especially in science. His favorite type of science was still in biology and his earth science. One afternoon during science in 8th class, things got pretty bad. A small pale boy with black hair and beautiful diamond black eyes, who wore her glasses, was looking up at the blackboard taking notes. Notes on board, the big ball in the center of the earth was called a core, and it's always spinning. He looked down at these notes quickly, and because he wanted to be the first one out the door, Draken sat in the back all alone. Whenever he looked down, his glasses would be inside out. His nose would always be quickly push them back up with his index finger. He was such a wonderful, nice child. He would never even hurt a fly. At the end of class, he grabbed his books, and when he grabbed his hooks, That's when they flew out the door. On his way down the chatting halls filled with children, someone stuck out a leg and made him trip. A bunch of bitchy teenage girls howled with laughter, and his glasses flew off of his face, and they were stepped on by a fat boy who came walking by. Draken shivered and sat up. He rubbed his nose and looked around. "Why can't I see anything?" he thought, as he realized his loose glasses were gone. Reaching out in the distance, he felt blind, feeling as if they were just a puppet on strings, and when the person who was pulling the strings would get bored and leave him hanging for a while. Finally, he came up upon broken glasses and put them on his face. He looked up at the laughing girls, and they started to chat. Drewy can't even tie his shoe, so he trips and messes all the dose over again," they sang, and of course Draken picked up his books and hurried to his locker. Draken as a child was always unlucky. He would always walk in gum trip, be laughed at, mugged, or even have his glasses broken. He hated his life. On the second year of high school one night, he thought of slitting his wrists and leaving Earth to go to God wants him to go. Heaven or hell, he didn't care. But he would have had prefer heaven, 'cause every day was a living hell. He didn't cut his wrists and watch the blood flow from his life and wash away down, because deep down, he felt like he was going to meet someone who would be by his side forever, and his love kept them safe while he is weak. Draken then put the knife down and went back to the porch and wished for that day to come. Like come now. A calm summer's night, and a man walked down into the sandy beach and sat by the water watching the sunset. He had been humiliated by his friends, and he didn't want to go back to college ever again. The water looked so peaceful and calm. Draken then smiled at it and tilted his head. Looking at his knees tightly close up to him, he gazed at the sunset. "Why does everybody hate me?" he thought to himself. Out of the corner of the eye, he saw someone walking down across the beach. A tall, slender girl who looked to be 17, walking up down the beach. She was wearing short jeans and flip-flops. She also had some black and white tank top and looked to be crying. She had Raven's black hair, and it was pulled back into a ponytail. She had head down with her hands covering them. Draken just made her watch by, and she was so pretty. He thought this was the most beautiful woman he ever seen. Even though he could have seen her face, she started to walk faster and suddenly tripped into wet sand. "Ugh, I hate this day," she said. Getting up on her foot was struck by the sand. "Oh geez, let me help you," Draken said quickly, rushing down the beach towards her and help her get out of the thick, wet sand. She then looked up and saw the guy, who seemed to be 24, was helping her out of the blue. Thank you," she said, standing up and put her flip-flops on again. Draken stood up and dusted himself off and then looked at her. "I guess I didn't see you coming," the girl said in a rag tone. "I guess not. Why were you crying?" Draken asked, putting his hands deep in his pockets. "Oh, well, I sort of had a bad day," she said, looking down at her feet, which was sinking into the sand as the water came up and down again. "Sorry to hear that. I hope you're all right. I didn't mean to startle you." "Have a nice day," Draken said, turning around and walking back upon the beach where the sand was dry. "Wait," the young girl said. Draken quickly turned around and raised his eyebrows. "Do you, want to go out for a walk with me?" she asked, rubbing her shoulders nervously. Just then a huge flow of happiness and excitement rushed through his body, and he smiled, walking down to the helpless girl again. They walked around for miles, and it seemed like forever. Draken found out the young girl's name was Shigo. She had also told him why she was upset. It was because her brothers had kicked her out of Team Go, because she wanted to become a villain. Draken told her how long and hard about his life, and what he wanted to take over the world, also telling her that it was possible. She found him funny, even though not the brightest human being in the world, but a nice one. They walked off a bit more when Draken stopped and asked Shigo a question. "I know I just met you and all, but it seems like you've been waiting forever, not knowing where I could find you. But I think I found the right person," he said sweetly. "What are you asking me, Drew?" she asked, confused. Well, you said you want to become a villain and do work with a villain as well. I was wondering if you would be my partner in crime, he said, holding her hands. Shigo raised an eyebrow and laughed. He felt just like a fool then. Maybe he was so fast. I would love that, Drew, she said, smiling, and started to go on a walk a bit more. Then his memory was starting to fade, and he came across one of the hardest days of his life. Shigo, Monkey Fist, and Dan Amy escaping from Dementor's grasp, when Dementor then shot Draken towards the heart. Remembering the past, he looked up at his love for Shigo, who then point her life didn't seem like a villain at all. She seemed like a nice, caring girl he met on the beach. Draken told Shigo how much he loved her, and while she held him in the arms and let his blood flow, she was crying, and in his heart he was too. Draken knew he was dying and he would go to heaven and watch over her and be her guardian angel, keep her safe from everything. But all things didn't turn out that way. He walked up to the clouds in the doorways of heaven, then when they didn't open, Draken was confused. He then looked around and realized he had a hollow and war things upon his black back and white t-shirt. Draken realized that God didn't open his doors to heaven to him because he wasn't ready to die. He wasn't ready to become an angel in the sky. He was ready to go home and be with Shigo because they needed each other. Draken began to stir. He cracked open his eye and slowly looked around. He was in a hospital bed covered with red sheets. At first, he thought that it was blood, and he wanted to be stick with, and he felt that he was relieved, shaking as he remembered all the memories that were awoken in his head and have remembered, dying and going up the stairway to heaven. His eyes shot open when he remembered Shigo. Where is... His mind trailed off when he looked down off the high hospital bed and smiled. There was a normal bed for the visitor lied Shigo, her hair poured over her pillow and her little face buried in it. Shigo looked to be safe and sound. Draken started to cry, a happy cry, the kind of cry that comes when you think of something goes wrong and a savior comes, or when your body is saved from the burning building. But Draken stared down at Shigo and laid a hand on his side so he could watch her sleep. He then told himself that he would never, ever leave her side again, even if she was a villain and nasty her at times. A good part of Shigo was dared not to show up to anyone, but to Draken. Taking a deep breath, he coughed a little, and a shot of pain ran across his chest. He looked down at teary-eyed and saw his left arm was in the sling, and one was on his chest blade was wearing a white patch of gauze. It then had hit him why he was there in the first place. He was shot from Dementor. No wonder why he felt weird waking up in his own bed. Thank you, God, Draken said, praying to himself silently, for giving me another chance in life. And thank you for letting Shigo and I be all right. And with that took his right hand and placed on Shigo's left hand, which rested on the pillow, and he held it. I'll keep you safe forever, Shigo, he said, looking back at her, and smiling peacefully. It had been around 6 nor 7 then, because it felt like a hot warm sun poured into the hospital room. He looked over his shoulder and opened the blinds. Draken smiled as she watched the sun rise, and while it rose he looked back down at Shigo, whose eyes began to flutter when she was awake. Shigo blinked a few more times, and then looked up and saw that someone was holding her hand. She looked up at Drew and saw Draken smiling down at her, somewhat crying. Drew! She almost yelled, and jumping and flying to his arms. Oh my gosh, you're okay! She said, sobbing on his shoulder. He winced but smiled. She then hugged him, not realizing that she had just had a bullet taken from his chest, and he was still hurt badly. She pulled away and sat down on the bed and held his hand. I thought I lost you yesterday at Dementor's. God reassure my prayers says today, Draken. He really did, Shigo said, wiping the tears from her eyes. When the ambulance came for you, they said it was too late. You were gone, she said, crying harder. And they also said there were barely any reason for you to go to the hospital, but I told them no, and I had almost fought them. And while we were on our way, you came back. God sent you home, Draken. And when we got here, the doctor said you were going to be fine. I will never forget these words. The doctor came out operating room and told me your heart still beats, and the bullet was about an inch above your heart. Shigo said with that, and she was crying so hard that she lied down next to him and held him close. She never wanted to lose him again. Draken was crying too. He wrapped his free arm around her and kept her close. I'm never leaving you again. I swear. I love you so much, Shigo, he said, holding her closer. I know. I love you too, she whispered, kindly burying her head into his sore chest. Draken was about to say something when there was a knock on the door. A tall, slender man with red and black hair came in. He looked to be in his 20s and looked mature for his age. Shigo sat up and kept Draken's hand tightly in hers. Hello, my name is Dr. Hershey, he said, shaking Shigo's hand. Nice to meet you, they both said. Well, Haken, is it? He said, confused. It's Draken, thank you, he said, raising one eyebrow annoyed. Well, Mr. Draken, it appears that you'll be all right. As of you know, the bullet was shot an inch above your heart, he said, smiling, staring down at the papers on the clipboard. And you, Miss Shigo, might have to go for an operation, but not sure though, he said, finish. An operation? Shigo screamed, getting out of the bed, not realizing she almost pulled Draken off the bed with her. I'm not going for the operation, you moron, she roared. Shigo, Draken said back. I know you prob, but doesn't feel like you're hurt. But we must have an x-ray at least, the doctor said, backing up in fear, realizing her free hand was glowing. Shigo, if you have to go for an x-ray, then go. It'll be all right. Just there to be a picture of your body and your bones, he said, rubbing her hand gently. Shigo sighed and leaned back down to kiss him, and then walked out of the room with the doctor. She stopped on the doorway. Try to get some sleep while I'm gone. In your worse shape than me, she said as she walked out. Draken was so happy everyone was all right and not dead. He then remembered Monty and Dee and Amy. He had hoped they were all right and guessed he would know later on. Draken smiled and laid back down on his back. He shut his eyes and started to dream. It was only a matter of time until Shigo came back with her x-ray with his results. Except during his dream, things didn't turn out the way he wanted to. It was only a matter of time until his nightmare began.
What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.